Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. This is the third and, sad to say, final one in our series with our friends at WorkJam. He's back. It's number 4 in terms of the ones we've recorded because we did one back at the end of 2020 with Tim. Hi, Tim. Back again.
Hi, Simon. Back again. Never enough of these things with you. Thank you for having me once again.
No, always good to talk. Those dulcet, I'm going to say Australian tones because you are Australian. I'm not going to offend you, Emma. Always good to hear, my friend. Always good to hear.
Thank you so much. When I speak in Australia, they think I'm English. I know that will probably surprise you given the way I sound, but I'm halfway between them, apparently.
Happy days. Well, you've come over to the right side of the world, haven't you? That's the main thing. So without further ado, episode 3, we're going to talk about operations. So I know, Tim, we've talked about episode 1, we've talked about task management. Episode 2 was around customer experience, how it links back through. Operations, I'm still we'll touch and go over some of the stuff we've done in maybe 1 and 2. But when we talk about operations from a WorkJam point of view, what does that mean? Is it a store? Is it a warehouse? Is it a manufacturing plant? Or does it not matter?
All of the above would be the answer, and potentially more. I mean, one of the fastest growing areas right now with the obvious switch to home delivery is actually, people driving trucks and vans and delivery vehicles around, and it all falls under our definition of a frontline worker. So someone who isn't sitting all day in front of a laptop doing their corporate email. We call them a frontline worker, and that's where the digital workplace is really effective in helping them. So, yes, stores, and that's probably one of our biggest areas of application, but certainly distribution centres, very common, as I say, trucks. Actually, healthcare is another area where we have fantastic applications. So hospitals, care homes, these kinds of things. And it does really show that there's a lot of uniformity in the kind of problems that organisations have with staff who aren't sitting in front of emails and intranets and laptop-based applications.
And some of those industries you mentioned there, I know retail historically has had a really bad rap for kind of labour turnover. So some people in treble digits in terms of turnover, would you believe? Others more stable. It must have a really, really big impact in terms of using something like WorkJam on that onboarding and let's call it reboarding as well, where people come back from uni for the summer or people are transient and dip in and out, helping to get a kind of cookie cutter, repeatable, consistent, reliable way of bringing people into the business, maybe even exiting people from the business and bringing people back into the business.
Really correct. And turnover is something where actually you can work to reduce the amount of turnover. So making things easier for your staff, making them really identify with your brand. So you reduce your turnover. But actually, a lot of businesses these days are embracing turnover in some sense, in that there's a burgeoning gig economy. So it's a fact that in a DC somewhere, they probably have students who work for a few weeks every now and again, rather than consistently through the year. So you hit upon the exact issue. How do we make sure that someone can execute effectively, whatever their role may be, store, warehouse, driving a truck, anywhere? How do we make sure they can execute effectively, whether they started a week ago or whether they've been with the business for 10 years? And there's a lot of elements actually to making that happen. You mentioned onboarding and reboarding. So onboarding, obviously, someone is new to an organization. What do you need to train them to bring them as quickly as possible to effectiveness? But reboarding is exactly that case where, for some period of time, short or long, you've been away from us. So maybe it's not the absolute full training that you need, but there's certainly top-up training that you will in order to come back. And whichever of those cases, the end result is better execution, more consistent execution for your operations.
And it's interesting because in this strange new unknown future that we've got in the world, I speak to lots of people that have changed companies in the last, let's say, 12 months. They've never physically met a co-worker. They've never been to the office. They've never been almost outside of their house working for that organisation. So that ability to give people the package to do that again, must have been really highlighted through the early days of the pandemic.
It really was. But actually, there's something else that's happening that's similar, but slightly different. So, as well as people changing companies, actually, what's happening an awful lot now, since all of the changes the pandemic drove, is people changing roles within the same company, maybe even within the same location. So, whereas maybe pre-pandemic, someone used to work at one particular store and they did a particular role or a couple of roles within that store, and that's all. Since the pandemic, that same person might be also, spending a lot more time in the back room doing some of those more operational pieces, which they never did before. We're getting people who are switching between stores in a way that they never used to. And even some organizations where taking people out of the stores where they have more than enough staff for, the changes that the pandemic drove, and putting them into the fulfillment function, actually changing them from stores to DCs. And that's something that historically didn't happen very much. So again, whether you're changing organizations or whether you're changing roles within an organization, that training element is really important. And you look at operational effectiveness, training is really where it begins. So how do you give people the tools that they need to do what you need them to do? And when people think about training, they're thinking that the old ways of doing training are no longer the way we want to do things going forwards, because it's not how people learn. If you're being reboarded, you don't want to be put in a 2-day classroom thing with a bunch of people who are new to the organization. You only need the top up. So please feed me some videos, some descriptive documents, maybe some information about how others are doing things. Let me do that top up training so that I can come back to speed very quickly. Whereas someone else who's brand new, yes, they probably do a more full training. They certainly do everything that I'm doing and some other things as well. But it really gives a much more tailored approach to training, where people can get what they need rather than everyone getting the same thing. But again, the end result is uniform and consistent execution in your operations.
Yeah, so if I move, I don't know, we'll make it up. If I work in a supermarket and I move from working on the shop floor to train as a baker, let's say, because I'm in the group of bakers in the hierarchy and the kind of behind the scenes of the solution, you can then target me with all the relevant training material, updates that helps me become a better baker.
Yes, indeed. And then you can step beyond training. So giving you the training in the right way, in a way that you prefer to consume it, that's great. But let's have a group, a social media type of group for all of the people doing the baker roles. So actually, I've had a disaster today, the baking machine isn't working properly, or, I did something different and wow, what a wonderful result. Everyone's so happy. You can share this kind of information amongst people with the same role. So if you can not only deliver training in a way that people want, but you can set up groups of communications, groups of information sharing among similar types of roles, among geographical groups if you want, many different ways that you can slice and dice. But what you need is a platform in place that allows you to put people in groups and share good information amongst those groups. And that's what a digital workplace seeks to do. And the other part, of course, that we'll talk about is actually executing itself. So if I'm new to being a baker, maybe I want to know the steps for a particular task, and I want a system that can walk me through those steps and maybe validate what I'm doing at each of those steps. Maybe just validate myself, maybe get other people to help validate. But task execution is something where a system can be really helpful, and that amount of help can change over time. More help at the beginning when you're new. Later on, you're probably much more competent. You probably look at it less. You don't need to know the processes quite as much. But again, that giving you the right information to execute in the way that we need is what a digital workplace can do.
Yeah, and there's a couple of bits in there. So there's that in that social group. Does it drive performance? So today I made 1,000 hot cross buns. Somebody else said, well, I managed to make 1,500. Somebody else managed to make 2,000. And then clearly the questions become, really? How did you do that? What did you do differently to me? As well as the piece around, actually, I only make hot cross buns is probably still a good example for these periods throughout the year. So next year, I might want to quick flick back through best practice of making hot cross buns because I've not made them for 9 months.
Absolutely right, and both of those pieces are enabled. There's actually a third piece as well, which is that we desperately need hot cross buns made in the store today, and unfortunately, the hot cross bun expert has just called in sick. So how can I quickly and efficiently, rather than me having to call 20 different people, is there a hot cross bun expert spare from your store? No. Let's have an automated way that a shift can be broadcast to the people with the right skills in the right proximate geographical area to say, can we now fill this shift, which has suddenly become available? So all these things tie together. Yes, as you say, the training and the information sharing. Yes, as you say, the tasks themselves and how they're delivered and how they're executed. But also that question of easily getting the right person in the right place with the right skills. It all comes together. And what's interesting is historically, they're all different systems. So the cases we've just outlined with those three big pieces, the training, the task execution, and the shift management, historically they come from three different places, which means that either your frontline worker has to deal with three different apps, three different look and feels, and they have to know when to go into each one. Or maybe you just don't get the usage out of them that you need, and you're actually dealing with them in other ways, informally. So, they will ring someone from a different store that they happen to know. Not really a scalable enterprise system. So the digital workplace can bring all of these needs together so that a frontline worker has what they need when they need it.
And that brings me completely not podcast related, but onto hot cross buns, because that's the subject that's clearly hot off the press. If M&S, I've tried M&S's Marmite hot cross buns and I'm on the fence. I don't know if you've had them.
I have not, but I'm a big fan of the blueberry and the apple and the standard, and big fan. Big
right.
fan.
So give them a go next time you're in there, and
we'll do so.
We'll then decide whether they should turn off the training for Marmite hot cross buns or not. I am massively on the fence. I do like Marmite. I get people don't, but I can't quite get my head around it. It's looking at something that then tastes like not what you expect it to taste like.
I will look out for it. And right now I can say you're the Marmite hot cross buns best salesperson that I've met so far.
Excellent. I'm the only one. So let's talk about some bits. We talked in, I think it was podcast 2, around health and safety. So driving compliance, consistency, implementation, which is clearly crucial. And I think even more crucial as we've worked through the pandemic with, occupancy in store, with face masks, with hand sanitizers. So that stuff all sits well. But one area we've not really explored is loss prevention. So talk to me about how you're seeing clients pull that into the mix of WorkJam.
Well, I think loss prevention, customers are looking at, and we're talking about data loss here, looking at different risks. So one of the operational risks actually is personal information going to the wrong place and all of the many issues that can arise from that. And so sometimes when you talk about mobile systems, there's a nervousness that people have around that. Now, what we can do in WorkJam is make sure that only the right information is transmitted out into the world. We can make sure that what is transmitted is highly encrypted, and we have a number of different technical and operational methods to make sure that actually we absolutely minimize data risk that you have in your organization. And what we see out there quite a lot when we start talking to customers about the digital workplace is many of them have sort of unofficial systems in place that are kind of doing what's needed. So they might have some social media messaging app. They go, look, we didn't put it there, but our stores, they've got a social media group so they can all talk to each other. Or the bakers, as we were just talking about, the bakers have all put together a WhatsApp group, where they're sharing information. Now, organizations are getting quite uncomfortable at those sort of informal methods because, when you do that, then mobile phone numbers and names and all this stuff is being shared around, and not every employee is comfortable with that sort of stuff being highlighted for all of their fellow staff. It doesn't have the sort of corporate security around it, and you also can't manage the groups actually. So if someone puts an informal group together or for all the bakers, let's just share the baker information, then one of the bakers leaves, but they're still on the group. No one's administering the group. And who knows what confidential information is going around. So WorkJam can actually look for certain types of information and make sure that it's not shared. Obviously, we anonymize things like phone numbers. We can anonymize names. We can do all sorts of clever things to make sure that we're really in control of information. And effectively, because this is such a key area, you have to have a digital workplace in place to do this effectively. Companies are more and more looking at this issue of data loss and preventing data loss and recognizing they definitely need proper enterprise systems in place and not a patchwork quilt of, some shadow IT, some unofficial and some official applications that maybe weren't built with this foremost in their minds.
Yeah, I like the shadow IT. I think you brought that to one of the other podcasts. So it was a new terminology for me, but it stuck with me. So what would you say to kind of those organizations that don't or haven't thought about this route, this digital enablement of frontline workforce, because maybe they've got an older workforce or they think that a high percentage of people wouldn't opt in?
I'd say look at the history of the digital workplace, and it is it's a relatively new category, but it's not brand new. So WorkJam's been around for 6 years now, doing the digital workplace with great success all around the world. And in our customer profile, we do have we have grocery companies where they have that stable workforce combined with a very changeable workforce. A really interesting profile. People that have been there for 25 years. As well as the students that come and go every year, all adopting the solution. We have companies like Shell, very different profile of employer again, a mixture of business types, so some owned by Shell, some not. Again, excellent adoption by their staff. We have very small companies, restaurants, service industry. We have, healthcare companies. We have small and large across many verticals. And with all of those different profiles of employee, our adoption rates are extremely high. And mobile adoption has always been a challenge in the IT industry. If you're giving people a bunch of different apps and saying, please use all these apps, it's really tough to get adoption because which app do I use when? And I'm not sure. They all look different. How do I use them? So we just simplify all of that. So it's one key application, one look and feel, integrating the different pieces that the frontline employee needs. And that really does result in excellent adoption. And I'd encourage everyone to go to our website, actually, workjam.com. We have a number of our customers who've been kind enough to do webinars, for example, talking about the success that they've had and some of the adoption rates that I've heard out of our customers' mouths are really incredibly impressive. I mean, well into the 90s as far as percentage adoption goes straight away. And you think about why is that? Why can we get these extraordinarily high adoption figures in an area that's been historically difficult? It really is about make it easy for your frontline staff. So it's not a burden to interact with the IT systems. It's actually not only easy, but it's genuinely value adding. So I have no concerns, whether it's the gig economy and will someone adopt if they're only working for us a few shifts a week. I have no concerns about I'm heading towards retirement. I've been in this job for, a couple of decades maybe. And, I'm not naturally an adopter of technology. I know that all of these different employee types embrace the digital workplace precisely because it makes their life easier.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up the series, to be honest. So a good set of principles to work to if you're enabling your digital workforce. If we wrap it up here as well, it also gives you time to get in the car and go on an official shopping trip to buy some Marmite hot cross bun.
I've got a job to do now. Simon, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great fun talking to you.
No, it's been a pleasure. Love this series. And if anybody wants to reach out with Tim, he's on LinkedIn. So Tim Wheeler, go through the website, workjam.com, and make contact. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Simon.